All right, hello kids. Let's talk about arrays. Array is a container of multiple values. Arrays exist to allow a single variable to hold multiple values. Before arrays, we had most likely a string that can hold multiple characters, but we didn't have any sort of way to hold multiple data values nicely in a single variable. However, we are talking about a specific concept called arrays in Java. It has a lot of restrictions, and you can see a lot of other data types that can do this in Java, which will be a lot stronger to use. But to get there, first we need to learn how to use Java. So let's talk about the requirements. So there are some requirements for us to use Java arrays in Java. The values in an array must all be the same data type. In other languages and other types of these like data set based data types, you can have a mix of data types within your container. However, this array is a container of the same data type values as your items. Another restriction is that the number of total items in your array must be set prior to creating your array. Therefore, let's say that you had 10 items in your array and you're thinking, oh, it would be really nice to add another one. Well, you have to either change a value that exists in this array or recreate an entirely new array. Okay. We can access and look at different items within your array by a concept called indexing. So indexing is just using our index value, which starts at 0, and going to that location of the array so that we can look at the value at that index value. And one thing really nice about this is that a value at a certain index can be changed or modified, which makes arrays mutable. And what is mutable? It comes from the terminology called mutability. A mutable value is one that can be changed without creating an entirely new value. So to talk about mutability, I want to introduce immutable data types. So immutable data types must be given a whole new value with an equal sign if you would want to variable to have different value. So which just means that they cannot mutate. So immutable means they cannot mutate. And a lot of the data types we've learned so far in Java are, in fact, immutable data types, such as byte, short, int, long, float, double char, and boolean are all part of the immutable data type family. Then we have strings are also immutable as well. And I want you to recall that, let's say you created a string variable for your name and you wanted to change like a single character of your name. You really can't. You have to recreate your name, set it equal to an entirely new name-based string. All right. Whereas arrays are immutable. Let's say you have set of items in an array and you want to change a certain value within that array. Rather than creating the entire data set all over again, you can just go to that certain index and update the value. So I want to show you a little example here. I've created a integer-based array called numbers and has values of 3, 1, and 4. 3 is located at index of 0, 1 is located at index of 1, and 4 is located at index of 2. That's why in this line of code here, I'm accessing this array variable that we created. At index of 2, I'm changing it to a 9. Rather than me creating a whole new list of 3, 1, and 9, I can just go to the index location of 2 and update that 4 to become a 9. Okay, this is us saying we have mutated the value at index of 2. Let's look at how to use an actual array in Java. So the array setup, you want to set the data type, put your square brackets right after, you create a variable name for the list that you want to create, and then you want to use the keyword new. Use and write the data type again, and this is where you type the size of your array. Before we give any values for this array, you must set a size. And this array size value should be an integer greater than 0. So let's create our example array in our replit. So right here, what I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to create a string-based array, and I'm going to call it fruits. And for this fruit array, we have to say it's a new string array with the size of, let's say, 3. Now let's make it 4. Right. So now I have a blank array called fruits, and it has slots. It has 4 slots where we can add fruits into at indexes of 0, 1, 2, or 3. So when we do indexing or when we do counting in general, most often in computer science, we start at 0. So this we can add an item at fruits index 0, fruit index 1, fruits index 2, and fruits index 3. Right now, we can't really do much with this because we didn't provide any fruits for our array yet. So if you wanted to, we can definitely say that at fruits at index of 0, we can provide a value of, let's say, an apple. Okay. And the value that we provide for this fruits array has to be the same as the one that we've stated. So if I try to do like fruits at 1 is equal to 1, you should get an error. So let's try and see what the error would be. Right, it says right here, on line number 7, I have generated an error. It says incompatible types, int cannot be converted to string, and at fruits on index 1, I cannot assign a value 1 there. So that is a blunder. All right, let's go back to our slides. So our example array, we have strings, fruits with size 5. This is an array called fruits. It can hold 5 items. Since we have no specified values, at index of 0 to 4, we actually have a null value, which means just like there's nothing in there. It is common practice to put the brackets after our data type rather than after the variable name. Okay. You can also create an array explicitly, as in using square curly braces and defining what the array is composed of. So I created array fruits here, and I've explicitly stated all the possible values we have in this array with apple, kiwi, and blueberry. So this array right now has a maximum of 3 values. And at index of 0, we have apple. Index of 1, we have kiwi. And at index of 2, we have blueberry. We're going to talk about traversal. And traversal is a way where we can look at each values in an array. So traversal is a way to look at each individual items in a data set, and we can do this by using some of the loops that we've learned in Java. So the most easiest one that you should be comfortable with is using a while loop. So we have a I variable set to 0, and we have a numeric list, our array with values of 3, 1, 4, and 1, 5, 9. And I'm going to say while I, this variable I that I created, is less than the nums.length. So .length is a length property that all arrays have, and it returns a positive integer with the number of items that array has. So in this one, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're saying, well, while our variable I, which is 0, is less than 6, we're going to do this code, okay? Just to make sure that my while loop terminates, I did put I++ at the end so that we're incrementing this I index variable by 1 at every iteration. At each iteration, we're going to run a system.out.println, and we're going to output that number colon is nums at this index of I. So basically, it's going to output 3, and I is going to increase to 1. So we're going to access this value, which is 1, then 4, then 1, then 5, then 9. And our I value is going to be equal to 6, which is going to make this false and helps us terminate the while loop. The act of looking through each values by using the index value and actually indexing our array can be a concept of traversal, where you are looking through an array with a while loop. You can also do it with the for loop and just really forego the while loop condition and do it all within the for clause. So within our for clause, we can set I to 0, and we're going to say that while I is less than, or this should be integer of I is equal to 0, and while I is less than nums.length, and we're going to increase I by 1 at every iteration, we get to output the same thing, which runs very similar to the while loop we wrote prior. There is a new loop called the for each loop, so we can use this with arrays. Instead of using the index to look through a array, we can actually use the values themselves. So once again, we're going to look at this nums array here composed of 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9. And we're going to say that we're going to create a variable called int number. And each of those number, or that variable for each iteration, is going to be taken from this array called nums. So on the very first iteration, instead of using our index values, we're going to be using the values themselves. On the first iteration, number is going to be 3. And after that is over, the number is going to take over and become 1. Then 4, then 1, then 5, then 9. Okay. Basically, this is called a for each loop, and it helps you access values in an array without relying upon the index. At this moment, this is all I need to teach you to kind of tweak and see what you can do for your worksheet problem, and I'll be creating more videos as you go. But let's actually look at an example array that we can create in Replit. So we're gonna delete all this here, and I'm gonna teach you some fun technique. So number one, on your Replit, I do want you to import java.util.star. So we're importing everything that we can possibly access from our utility module or library. And then what we're going to do is following. We're going to say create an array of squares. So we're going to have integer values in our array. So I'm going to create an integer based array. We're going to call this squares. It's going to be new integer, and let's say we want all the values from 1 to 10. So that's 11 values. No, 10 values, 10 values. Okay. We're going to have a counter set to 0, and we're going to have a starting value of 1. And I'm not coding in Python, so I need to do explicit data type declarations like so. So we're going to be utilizing these variables to help us fill out this square array. I'm going to start a while loop and say while, set my while loop like so. And we're going to say, well, while counter is less than 10. So I want to run this loop 10 times and make sure that this loop terminates by having my counter plus plus at the end. Right here, what we're going to do is say that squares at this index of counter, because it starts at 0, it's going to be set to start multiplied by start. And at every iteration, we're also going to increase our start as well. Basically, this is how we get our square. So we're going to have 1 times 1, then 2 times 2, then 3 times 3, then 4 times 4, and so forth. And if we want, we can have a nice little system out that println. And we can say that start multiplied by start has been added to our array. Awesome. And then after our while loop is done, we're going to use a handy dandy little tool to convert an array to be printable as a string. Then we can say final result is equal to plus. We're going to use arrays.toString. So this is only available if you have imported java.util.star. And we're going to convert that array to a string. Okay. Let's run this code. Okay. Now, as you notice, we're going to output from 1 to 100, right? We have 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100. Basically, we were starting at 1 and we were increasing our values all the way to 10. And at every iteration, we were multiplying that start value by itself to get a square. Therefore, our final result, when we have outputted our array, we got 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100 as our values in our array. And we can only have 10 values, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 values. Okay. So that was our example of an array and how to use them. We've talked about how to use multiple loops to traverse them and so forth. And you got a nice little introduction to arrays. I wish you luck during the worksheet I've given you. Try them out. Worst case scenario, ask ChatGPT to solve them. But if you have any questions, you can also find me or email me as well. All right. So have a good day, kids, and till next time.